Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. Happy Wednesday before Christmas. I think we are five days out. Is the official countdown now. So I changed my background a little bit, which is ironic considering the guests that we are going to have coming on and joining us in a moment. But I hope everybody is doing well out there. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast, and joining me is my partner and my friend. Merry Christmas to you, Brendan. I know we'll see each other before then, but this is our official show, so we'll send out our official Christmases right now.
That's right. Yeah, we'll see each other again in less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
We have a pregame show to do, but Merry Christmas to all of you, loyal Hoodats, loyal members of the Bayou Blitz family. We thank you for taking some more time out today to hang out with us as we preview the New Orleans Saints and the Los Angeles Rams. Got a special guest coming. You can see it there on the bottom of your screen. Some of you guys I know have bookmarked this throughout the day since the announcement came out. Jim's a great football mind. He's a really good friend of the program. We're just excited to be able to pick his brain a little bit about all of this. And speak of the devil, here is our friend Jim Everett. We apologize as well. Technical difficulties, getting on a little bit late, for myself, for Bob, for Jim, for everybody. Here's the one and only Jim Everett. Jim, thanks so much for taking time to hang out with us today.
Brandon, Bob, good to be with you guys. When you have to update some firmware, I'm pretty firm that it's difficult because that's where we were.
To say the least, and Jim, you and I are a little bit older than our friend Brendan here, so we need to be excused for our any additional delays in updated software and the knowledge to use it.
No doubt. But it's good to be here, you guys. It's like what a week this is for both teams. I mean, coming in Thursday night, it's a primetime game, playoffs on the line for both squads. I mean, this is what the NFL is all about.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you want to talk about a back to the future kind of feel, like the old NFC West days. The 49ers already have their spot clinched, and here we are, looking at the Rams and the Saints fighting it out for one of the last playoff spots in the NFC. And I know you followed both teams real closely. Which of the two teams right now are better built for a sustained playoff run?
Man, that's a great question, Bob. I mean, that's like, I think, defensive wise, I would have to give the advantage a little bit to the Saints on that part. I think with all the youth movement that they have on the Los Angeles coast over here, you don't know what you're going to get, but the guys are playing. They're playing well. You just don't know with rookies, can they be consistent? But they've sure the young guys Les Snead has brought in, and even some of the free agents like Witherspoon really have played beyond their pay grade. Put it that way. On New Orleans side, I think their defense is stacked. I think that's what holds this team together. You worry a little bit more about the offensive side. Who's going to be healthy? Can Kamara? Can he tote the ball? Because they're going to need some of that, take some of the pressure off Carr and. I don't know what my camera's doing, but it's just having fun. One of those technical difficulty things.
Well, you're out in L.A. Is it is it a Nakatomi Tower syndrome, or is it a cyber terrorist attack going on out there?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea about all this Wi-Fi and stuff, but I think we're pretty good so far. But I guess we'll have to tune into Twitter to find out what's true.
Yeah. No kidding.
Jim, the last time we talked to you, we were talking to you right after the Derek Carr to New Orleans Saints news broke. Not too far after that. It's been a little bit of a struggle for Derek Carr, to say the least, and the fan base has certainly made their voices heard throughout that process. Going back to when you joined the Saints. Obviously, not quite the same reception that Derek Carr is getting. I don't remember a whole lot of boos in the Superdome for you and those teams by any
No.
means early on. What difficulties can you speak on having been in a similar situation, switching teams, kind of midpoint of your career, and some of those struggles that happen early in the season? And do you think at this point in his first season with New Orleans, Derek Carr should be over some of those early season struggles, or are those things that continue to go on throughout the first season with a new team?
Well, I mean, you're mixing a whole bunch of bags of things with them. I mean, I would say that if everybody was healthy on that offense, then I would say everything's more justified. But then again, we're coming into Thursday night, and both teams, if you boo them or not, are playoff bound, or at least one of them may be, or maybe both. I don't know. However, that could work out, but I think that that's the NFL. I mean, it's that close. I think there's some games that New Orleans could have won. I'm sure there was some throws that Derek would have liked to take back, but that's part of the learning curve. I think he's dealing with some talent on the outside that's newer. Well, and like I said, we need to get that running game established, especially against the Rams. I think that's where there's some vulnerability. But if you get in a pass situation all the time with Aaron Donald, you're asking for trouble.
No question about that. And hey, listen, if you're the offensive coordinator for the Saints or you're Derek Carr, how would you go about attacking this Rams defense? How do you nullify? Well, not even you can't even nullify the man. How do you contain Aaron Donald and keep him from absolutely wrecking your offensive game plan?
Okay, so that's a great question. I think every offensive coordinator that plays the Rams has some sort of strategy. Number one, you're not going to hold the ball more than 2.4 seconds. So the ball's out. You got to find either screens, you got to find slants, you got to find something, bubble screen, whatever it might be that you're mixing things up. You cannot be static. If it's like a 2-minute situation where you're throwing every down, you're in trouble because they're going to bend their ears back and come because those guys can bring it. So you got to mix it up. The other part is with the running game, I think there needs to be some traps. And what I mean by that is Aaron has a tendency sometimes to jump gaps. And if the guy over him is going to block down or block out, and then you trap him on with someone, again, it's going to be a tough block. Don't think it's not going to be easy, but you got to, what I'm trying to say is you got to mix it up with him. If you just keep doing just zone blocking all day long, it's not healthy for anyone's health on that offense. So just mix it up. You got some whams, you got some traps, you got some, counters, misdirections. I think all those things are going to be up against that defense. And at that point, then you're going to say, hey, can we kind of test their corners? Can we? Olav is going to be healthy, right? So let's get him out there in some space and test some of those defensive backs, especially the safeties. I think that's a part where I think New Orleans could probably take some advantage.
You've already mentioned a few times, Jim, how important it is to get the run game going. And one thing Bob and I have talked a lot about on this show this year is it goes a lot deeper than Alvin Kamara. Obviously, you have Taysom Hill in the run game, that joker, that wild card on the offense. But we've both spoke about Jamal Williams, who led the NFL in rushing touchdowns a season ago with Detroit, ran for over 1,000 yards, and he's been very stagnant so far in this offense, whether that be because of lack of touches. He dealt with his own injuries early in the year. How important is it to have multiple guys touching the ball early against this Los Angeles Rams front seven?
Oh, I think it's huge important. I mean, I think it's if the Saints don't mix up the run game and get some production out of the run game. I was sitting there looking at some of the stats. The red zone stats aren't that tasty either. So I mean, once you get in the red zone, you got to establish some run. We got to put some pressure on them. But even in the field, I think that's going to be a key to the game, and I'll bank on that. I mean, even Miller back there. I mean, I like the running back that New Orleans has. It's just that they got to get productive, and we gotta call plays that do some misdirection. I mean, I'm watching the Baltimore Ravens run the ball, right? And they're doing some great things. I'm watching San Francisco 49ers run the ball. They're doing some great things. But we can't just be static back there with 11 personnel and expect that we're going to be creative. So there needs to be, Taysom's up. I know he was down, injured for a little bit. If he's up, we got to do some not just trickery, but just make it so that when you do play action, it's believable. Then Derek can take care of the ball.
All three of us have mentioned how important it is for the Saints to run the ball. I don't think the Rams running game is getting nearly enough attention nationally. Kyron Williams has been balling out, and I think if I did my numbers correctly, LA is averaging about 160 yards on the ground in their last 5 or 6 games. Is that a product of Sean McVay actually being more patient with the running game? Because we know that man loves to throw the football. Or is Kyron Williams just that good? And or is it a matter of the Rams' offensive line better suited for run blocking than pass protection?
Again, there's like a combo cup of thing. Offensive linemen are young. I mean, Noteboom was playing right tackle, but I don't think he's going to be up this Thursday. He really was doing really well in place of Havestein. But I think that offensive line is more of a maulers than it is, finesse pass. And so that's why I think you see the Rams really focus on the run, kind of what we're talking about with the Saints. Focus on the run, get Kyron, make sure that that you hear the sirens with Kyron, because I mean that makes everything work, because then all of a sudden you get the Cooper Cups out, you get all the gaps where your linebackers are barking.
Sorry.
But anyways, those types of things put pressure on your defense, and you got to do it. And so what LA has found success, especially the last 4 weeks, is Kyron runs the ball very patiently, but hits the hole very hard, and he's doing a good job of bouncing through the hole and getting positive yards. When you do that, the linebackers have to respect it, and then you can start getting people behind him. It's very similar to what I see. I see both these teams very similar. It's just one. I think LA right now, over the last 4 weeks, has been one of the top 2 teams in the league in offense, and that's what I think you're seeing. I've always said this: when you reach December, you've got contenders and pretenders. All right, the pretenders fall away, and I'm telling you right now, the Rams are playing hot, and you want to play hot in December, and I think that's where it looks at contenders, that they're trying to be that. But New Orleans could be the contender. It's going to be a tough road to hoe coming out here on the road, but it's doable.
Talking about the Rams and how well that offense has been playing, and how it looks like it's been just going on all cylinders. A lot of that has to do with Matt Stafford being back as well.
Yeah.
Jim, Matt Stafford is a guy that up until his time in LA, I thought was a little disrespected.
Let me correct this, because if you ever meet Matthew, he wants to be called Matthew, not Matt.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. Matthew Stafford, I always thought was disrespected by the national media when he was in Detroit. I never thought he got his flowers. He comes to LA, he does what he does, he gets that Super Bowl ring, gets a lot of his flowers. He gets hurt this year, and again, national media almost forgets how good Matthew Stafford is.
Right.
What are the things you see on tape, and as a former Pro Bowler yourself, that make you go, Stafford's the real deal, and he's a guy that could lead this Rams team to a similar Super Bowl run potentially?
So, Brandon, I think you bring up a great point. Last year, Matthew Stafford got hurt. He had a little bit of elbow. He had some sort of nerve thing that got pinched in his neck and went down his leg. So he was hurt. But there was also flux in the offensive line. They weren't blocking properly. They had 12 different combinations throughout the year, so they couldn't get it down. The receivers aren't the receivers that we have this year. And so Stafford was waiting for everybody to get open, which was too late. So it was kind of a layered sandwich. And so then we get into this year, and then all of a sudden we find Puka from nowhere, and he comes on and probably going to set a rookie record for receiving. And then Robinson's doing great. We picked him up, like I said, on the defensive side. We've got some young guys. So, but Matthew has I think the fact that he's going to be a quarterback. Have you watched the quarterback series last year where they had Mahomes and
Mm-hmm.
What was that? What was the series called? Forgets my.
Oh.
Mariota was on it, and
Yeah.
Mahomes. Anyways, he's going to be on that this year. So
Awesome.
yeah, I think the TV presence in his house has helped him.
Would you have liked to have had something like that when you were playing though?
Oh, well, would I have liked it? I don't know if I would have liked it, but the fact is that they're getting paid at least 10 times more than we got paid, so I probably would put up with it.
That's true. That falls right under the category of almost everything has a price. So yeah, I think I'd probably be able to swallow that a little bit easier too if I'm getting paid what some of these guys are.
Well, it's a good show too. I mean, as far as bringing the fans on the journey throughout the year, because man, when you're playing 17 games in an 18-week schedule, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. I mean, you can just see by your own team between injuries and how you recover and what the mindset is after losses and what the mindset is after wins. And I think it really brings that home. And I don't know if, I know people like to tune in on Sundays or Monday nights or whatever it might be, but there's also the other 6 days of the week that a pro athlete, being a pro athlete, how he presents himself in the community, within the home, take care of his body, all those different things. And I think those things are good to see because it's not just I'm getting paid on Sunday job.
Yeah.
Going back to Matthew Stafford a little bit and what he's been so good at in Los Angeles. And I'm glad you brought up how Puka had kind of came out of nowhere and is having this phenomenal season, especially in the place of an injured Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp coming back and Matthew Stafford coming back seamlessly at the same time. You look at the numbers and it's like they haven't missed a beat. They're Batman and Robin out there. On the West Coast, one just isn't right without the other. For a guy like Cooper Kupp to come back at this point in the season alongside Matthew Stafford, what kind of jolt does that give to an entire offense, knowing you're not getting just one star player back, but you're getting two?
Well, I think it's very important because his preparation. If you've been around Odell Beckham. When Cooper was with him or now with Puka or whatever. I mean, he's very encouraging. He's one of those uplifting, positive teammates that I think is good for the squad. He's almost another coach on the field, and kind of humorous too if you've listened to some of his stuff. But they ask him to block and they ask him to do a bunch of different things. He was lead blocking one time. Like, oh my gosh, even that's how he hurt his ankle because he was on a lead block. But he's willing to give it up for the team, and he has. But man, I'm telling you, that's the things that he does, the moves that he makes. So it looks so casual on TV, but it makes the defender, just can't figure it out. He did a wheel route last week, and he was open by 30 yards. I mean, there was no one around him. I'm like, that's Cooper Kupp. That's one of the best receivers in the NFL. You don't let him just run down the field free like that. But, that's what having good talent around him. And I think that's what Derek Carr is looking for, too. If we want to flip on the New Orleans side, is Derek's looking for those consistencies at the wide receiver position. And I know he's dealing with some youth out there, but with Olam, who is not in play, that puts a lot of pressure on the backups. And I mean, there's a difference. Separation is different between receivers, and it helps when you have your starting guys.
I'm glad you brought up Carr and the relationship that he's working on with his receivers. A lot has been made earlier in the year about Derek kind of sniping at Olave, other receivers, offensive linemen, and At first, I personally took it with a grain of salt because, yeah, look, yeah, that's the heat of competition. Don't pay much attention to it. But it happened. It kept happening with different teammates. With only Derek Carr being the single constant. What's your take out of that?
Well, I'm not there. I'm not in the huddle to judge to know exactly what's going on. I know that when you're a quarterback, you get a lot of pressure to get things done right. And when
Mhm.
things aren't getting done right or correctly or anticipate, it's up for someone to try to help correct that. And usually that could be a quarterback, that could be a position coach, it could be offensive coordinator, it could be whatever. I can't judge what was going on, but it sounds to me like things weren't running uh, as smooth as people would want them. And Derek is not going to be not say anything because I know he's a perfectionist. So I know that he's gonna ask people and maybe demand people, and that's what leaders do. Now, if that leadership style doesn't work for certain people or whatever, I mean, you got to kind of figure that out. But Derek also, at the point in time, has to have the flip side where you talk. You have some sort of relationship beyond just the football field with your teammates, and that helps. So that when you are in the heat of battle, someone go, "Yeah, bro, I get you, I get you. I did that wrong, whatever." So it's not just battle. But if you don't have that relationship off the field, it's hard to just be critical on the field.
We know that you're extremely close with Quinn Early, one of your wide receivers in New Orleans. Did you have that kind of relationship with Flipper and Henry Ellard in Los Angeles too when you were out there? And obviously, if so, how big a help was it?
It was. I think that it's imperative that you have a relationship off the field as well as on the field with all your teammates. I mean, I think that that's part of leadership. That's part of getting to know, because at that point, if you are a leader, then you know what flips somebody's switch, and that's part of leading your team. And coaches do that all the time too, and quarterbacks need to. But yes, the relationship with Flipper, Henry. I would say my relationship with Quinn Early was probably pretty special on that part. I mean, we hung out a lot more, and he showed me around New Orleans when I first came down there, and it was really really good. Him and Wesley Walls. Matter of fact, like I said, my son is named Quinn for a reason.
Hmm.
So he was a pretty special guy. So I mean, I don't know if that comes along in life all the time, but I would just encourage whoever the quarterback is, or whoever your teammate is, or whatever situation. This is just not football either, guys. This is life. Know the person. Know the person you're with. It's important. Know what they like, what they dislike. Know how they react when you demand something or ask something, or maybe you have to come a different way, because that's what life's all about.
Bob talked a little bit about the criticisms from the fan base in New Orleans towards Derek Carr, and from some of the local media, particularly early. As I mentioned before, that stuff has continued throughout the season for New Orleans. I know a lot of athletes, when asked by the media about, do you hear the outside noise? The typical player or coach speak answer is, no, we're just going to focus on this, that, and the other. As a guy who's been in the position playing quarterback for multiple NFL franchises, how much do you hear that noise, and how much does that affect a person on the day to day?
Well, again, everyone's different on that, but yeah, I mean, you're going to hear it. You can't tune it all out, but I'm sure, as far as Derek being his first year, in that particular season system, with new guys, with new, the new stuff, the early on, the first, like I would say, the first 8 weeks is different. Even if let's take this a personal, so it's not just Derek Carr. Let's take Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott, his first 8 games is different than Dak Prescott his last few games. I mean, I'm not saying this last weekend because Dallas got really drilled by Buffalo, but before that, he was learning the West Coast offense and putting that in, and so he went from Kellen Moore's offense into the offense he's running now, and he was just now getting efficient. I think you saw that with Brock Purdy last year. It takes a while to get going, and that's where there might have been some frustrations with the fans, his own frustrations, whatever. But the offense now should be what he knows. He should be able to get there an audible after the amount of games that he has right now. So if it carries on, I mean that's because he's not playing the game as the fans expect, and I really thought New Orleans would come out number one in that division this year.
Hmm. Jim, Sean McVay's offense passing attack has always given Dennis Allen defenses fits, and Allen has put together some pretty darn good pass defenses too. Uh, New Orleans has struggled to pressure the passer quite a bit this year. Now they've turned it on a bit in the last two games. So obviously, and this goes with any team. It goes without saying against any team, you got to pressure the quarterback. But what does McVay's system and those receivers, Cup, Nakua, Atwell, and then, but before that, Robert Woods and those guys. What does he do with them that makes them so successful against a very good New Orleans defensive backfield?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's not just the New Orleans teams that he's doing it against. I mean, there's a lot of motion, and the motion kind of plays with the defensive back schemes, and it lets Stafford know if it's man or zone. I mean, it's all of the we're going to do this, and that way, when the motion comes through, we're going to be able to block back and pull the tackle and do some different things. So I'm seeing more pulling guards and tackles out of the Rams running game than I saw the years before. Because they were a lot more zone scheme, especially with Gurley back in the time. But now they're doing a lot more of this, I'm going to say the San Francisco, Miami type pulling, trap type stuff that they're seeing. I mean, Jordan's going to see some of that. I mean, they're going to try to do that. They're not going to just drop Stafford back straight away and let him just come at the tackle. But I think the key thing is pressure from the defensive tackle position. You got to get up in Stafford's face. You got to move those guards. Nabil is playing really good at that left guard, but if you somehow can move that pocket back into Stafford's face, you're going to have a lot more success because the outside edge stuff. Stafford's really. I know he's not the most mobile guy, but he moves around very well, and his arm, the way he can throw it, he's hot. And we're going to talk about quarterbacks that are hot right now. It's Matthew Stafford. I mean, I would say he's playing one of the top 2, 3 at the position right now.
For the viewers and listeners at home, and Bob and I have talked about this the last few weeks, the difference between mobile quarterbacks and quarterbacks that move the pocket well. You just said Stafford is not a mobile quarterback, but he moves the pocket well. Could you explain a little bit of that difference to the viewers at home that may not fully grasp the difference between the two?
Okay. So, I mean, let's take a guy like the Bears. We're talking about their quarterback, and he's a mobile quarterback, Justin Fields. He's a mobile quarterback looking to, if the reads or something breaks down, and then he's going to tuck the ball and run. Okay. Now that's a young quarterback. He's got that asset ability with his legs. CJ Stroud, let's take him, for example, down in Texas. He's got athletic ability as well. He could tuck and run, but more like Matthew Stafford, he keeps his eyes down the field looking for the next guy, like Mahomes does. He would prefer to dish it off than just take off like a Justin Fields or a Lamar Jackson. So there's guys that would say, okay, things are going to break down. I'm just going to use my legs to get out of here. Cam Newton used to be more like that. Then there's guys which Matthew Stafford would fall in saying, I'm not really going to do it. Even Mahomes would fall into saying, I'm going to move. I'm going to buy a little bit more time. I'm going to let my defensive backs put a little more pressure on the defensive backs. And then someone breaks free on more of a scramble drill. Then all of a sudden you get a chunk play. And that's where Matthew is more like that. Jared Goff is more your pocket passer. And he's having a hell of a year, but you're not going to see he'll buy time like Matthew does, but he's a little bit more static in the pocket. So I don't know if that tells you exactly, but those are the kind of the things that you're looking at. Kyler Murray would be more of your scramble guy, but he does want to throw the ball to the very end, but he's got to run for his life because the Arizona line is horrible.
Yeah. both of these teams have tons of top tier players on both sides of the ball. I mean, your Demario Davises, your Aaron Donalds, Stafford, Olave, Kamara, Puka, Cup. We know the names.
Yep.
What player or players on either side, would you term as an X factor, the kind of guy that nobody's really talking about, but you're sitting back here saying, because I know you follow both teams closely, you're sitting back here saying, this guy, he's having a good year, and I like the matchup that he has in this game. What under the radar player do you think could have a breakout game tomorrow night?
Whoa, man. That's a great question. What's that number one draft pick that we had this year? Breezy, what's his name?
Brian Brisset. Wow. Yeah, Brisset.
What's he up to? Because I think we're anticipating him to own that interior spot.
And he's playing on fire lately. I think he has five and a half, 6 sacks, about a dozen pressures and quarterback hits. You've been playing really well.
Good, because that's the position that needs to be in Matthew Stafford's face. That's the position that has to stop some of those interior runs. They're going to do their jet sweeps and get outside and try to do it, but you have to stop from the defensive tackle. I would say that if New Orleans wants to, try to, keep Kyron Williams kind of at check, he needs to hold his position against Avila and those guys. And I'm talking about all the defensive tackles, but I'd like to see him shine because I think that's why they drafted him.
I want to ask you an interesting one, at least interesting to me. You're seeing this great story in New Orleans, the Jimmy Graham coming back home story.
Jimmy Graham was playing when I was playing, wasn't he?
Darn close.
It seems like it. But Jimmy's been around the block. He's played for a lot of great franchises, played for a lot of great quarterbacks. So I wanted to ask you, was there any time in your career where a player came back to the franchise or a player came out of retirement and still impacted the game, and what that meant for you in a locker room if you had a guy that comes to mind?
Man, I can't recall someone like that, especially at a specialist position. Usually when they move on, and it's maybe offensive lineman, but not especially. But Jimmy's kind of a special guy. He was top notch when he was down in New Orleans. It was great. I'm old enough to know that he was holding out wanting wide receiver money, not tight end money, and then he ends up going to Seattle and Green Bay, and it's like they're not using him properly. No one ever used him properly like they did in New Orleans. I really wish he would have never moved because, boy, him and Drew at the time really had a good combination. But it's good to see him back. I really was amazing to see him come back, but he got a touchdown last week, which was really good to see.
Let's take a couple steps back in time, and I always love to do this when we get you on the show. When you were the Rams quarterback, and you guys were putting up such prolific numbers, especially you and your wide receivers. But you have to face that dome patrol and that great New Orleans defense twice a year. When you're going into a game with New Orleans, and you're not only dealing with those 4 Hall of Fame caliber linebackers, but a great defensive line. What kind of game plan did you guys put together when you were with the Rams dealing with the Saints?
Oh man, survival, man. You just we were in a division with 49ers and with New Orleans, and you just knew both those games were going to be physical. It reminds me a lot of, I'm sitting there looking at the conferences now where you got Cleveland and Cincinnati and Pittsburgh and Baltimore, and I think they're all winning records or at least tied. It kind of reminds me of that type of situation because each one of the teams up there could win it all. It's just that kind of talent you had to play week in and week out. So the Dome Patrol, I can tell you from historically they were really really tough, and Dom Capers was running that team, and they got to do some stuff. I think now you're seeing New Orleans more of a 4 down lineman scheme, and so you
Mhm.
don't see as many of the linebackers doing all their games. But that was with Sam Mills back there. He had those guys going. It was tough. It was tough running against those guys because of Sam. And believe it or not, because he was shorter, it was an advantage for him. I mean, there was a couple times we pull the guard, pull the tackle. They'd be coming around, and then Sam would like drop down in some sort of rabbit hole and pop back up and make the tackle. I mean, he's just that kind of guy. It's like you didn't see the rabbit hole on the ground, but you just. I mean, there was a few games we just had to survive 2 or 3 quarters and not give them the big play, because they're going to knock the ball out. They're gonna try to intercept. And then once you get the pass rush tired, then you can get to work on them and try to get their secondary, because they did not have a secondary that was as formidable as their front seven.
Yeah.
Well, and looking at the infamous game against that New Orleans defense you were talking about for Flipper, what's going through your mind? And this might be something you've been asked before. Like, are you aware in those moments and in those games that
I'll just pull this up. Can you guys see this real quick?
Yeah.
That's the game ball for that.
So you got it. Flipper didn't.
No, I got it. And I promised him I'd give it to him. Someday I'll give it to him. Coach Robinson gave it to me. They didn't realize he set the record.
Well, that kind of answers my question. The question was going to be, do you realize in game when you're really close to records or records are being set, or are you so focused in on just winning the ball game, you don't recognize any of those things?
Well, I think nowadays with all the technology going on, I mean, the guys will know it instantaneously. Back before social media and all that stuff, no, we didn't really know until it was really after the game. I think they knew up in the booth, but we didn't know on the field. And then at the end of the game, we came out. We're so excited we won, and Coach Robinson gave me the game ball and the whole deal. And I'm just like, I don't think he even realized that Flipper set that record. But I have promised I will give it to Flipper.
Well, listen, there's a lot of some days left, and Flipper had such a spectacular night. But people forget that you got the living hell beat out of you for 4 quarters. So I submit that Jim Everett deserves to have that game ball. Flipper's allowed to have an autographed picture of it or something like that.
I might be able to share it for a lifetime, whatever. It's good, but you're right. I think that was the premise of having some of the fake joints I have right now was. It was fun, but no. Whenever you played a Jim Mora team, and it was fun, and I got the chance to play for Jim Mora, and I can speak that for the people of New Orleans. Jim was such a quality guy, and man, he just had passion, and of course when we didn't win, and whatever those years later, man, he was intense. One of the most intense coaches I've ever been around, if not the most intense coach I've ever been around. But Jim Mora got his teams fired up, and I think that's what I'll say is throughout the coaching changes, and I don't know. When teams get new coaches, if that happens the Saints at some point, if that happens to Rams, whatever, man, you got to find a coach that the players are going to go over the cliff for. I mean, and that's the difference. I mean, you can hire assistant coaches, and you see that happen with teams around the league, but you have to find a leader that's going to be a leader of men, and that's not only knowledge from the game, but there's also a personality trait that I think needs to, be keyed up when you're looking for a head coach of your team.
Well, let me take that a little bit further, because so many times in today's NFL, in today's social media age, people ask, well, do coaches really make that much of a difference, or this or that? You kind of answered the question. Yeah, coaches do make a difference. But for Jim Everett, who played for a handful of coaches and a handful of teams, what did you want out of your head coach? What were the things that you were looking for in that leader of men personally?
Well, it's funny you asked that because I actually was talking about it. Number one, you want a leader. You want leadership, and what is leadership? We can get into describing all sorts of things. It's having compassion. It's be able to understand what team building is all about. It's about personal building, knowing each one of like we just talked about earlier with Derek Carr. You got to know each one of the players, each one of the, I mean, even the scout team, even all the players that come, they have a personality. They all come together like some sort of mad chemistry set. And bringing those all together as a head coach, you have to have a feel of what you allow, what you don't allow. Yeah, you got to have knowledge of the game, but you also have to have, which I don't think Brandon Staley had down in is you have to have some common sense. You have to know when to risk, when you don't, or you lose the locker room. And I think that's what happened with the Chargers as far as being able to say, I'm making these decisions and oh yeah, the stat says I should do this or this, but common sense goes, no, I'm not going to do that. Or you have the game in hand, and then you're totally blitzing everybody, and you're leaving your defensive backs out to dry. And that happened down in San Diego. So I mean, I think we're taking some. There needs to be some. You need to help the players out. It's part of a building block between ownership, the coaching staff, and the support staff, and the players. All three of those blocks need to be on the same page. You want to throw another block being the GM in there as well. That would be fine too, because most houses are built on four corners, and you need 4 blocks of good. I don't know if I'm going too far on what you're talking about here, but your ownership, your GM, your coach, and your players all have to be supported.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly put. And obviously, and I have a follow-up question of my own. Obviously, Brendan and I are asking you about coaching because Dennis Allen has been under such fire this year. And not only Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael as well. A lot of it, in my opinion, richly deserved. But you, as the quarterback, as one of the team leaders, when you feel like the coach is starting to lose that locker room or the message is becoming stale, however you want to put it, how, as a player and the leaders on the locker room leaders, how can you try to keep your team together? Especially in the Saints' case, they're 7-7, still very much in the playoff race.
Very much in the playoff race, and I think it's premature to be able to say, sure, there's certain things you wish things were different, or you beat Atlanta or whatever it might be to be number one right away. But I think that the players have to take ownership of what's going on. You can have a coaching staff, you can have a general manager, you can have an owner. And those are the other blocks we talked about. The players have to take it upon themselves to represent. And what I mean by that is hold each other accountable. And that means it's a team meeting without coaches, without personnel people. And the team decides how they're going to handle situations. If they have not already done that yet, I would recommend every team to do so. And that way you can look at your person next to you and say, hey, you said you were going to stop them. You're going to just do it, and they start relying on each other. But you have to have some of that dialogue that we talked about earlier, know what triggers people. But if you have leadership in the locker room, meaning from the players, it's helpful. If you're always looking to management or to a coach for leadership, you ain't good. You're a pretender. You're not a contender.
There you go.
You kind of mentioned that a few times already. Contender, pretender, you get to really see your true colors in December. I think I just rhymed unintentionally.
You did. I'm impressed.
You got a guitar over there?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. Nobody wants to hear me sing because your ears are going to bleed. I'm not Christmas caroling this year for that reason. But, I digress.
Come on, Brandon. We want to hear it. We do want to hear it.
You really don't want to, Jim. It's bad. It's bad. Maybe another day. Maybe another day. But it's bad.
All right, Bob. Hold them to it. Hold them to that, Bob.
You better believe it. You better believe we're going to have a live Bayou Blitz karaoke night one night.
Oh man, that's gonna get is negative views a thing? Can we get negative views? I think we might. That might be the
Oh my
night.
goodness.
Oh
All
man.
right.
All right. So contenders, pretenders. See them, kind of come to the surface here late in the season. You mentioned some of those things in the locker room that could really separate you. Obviously, the things on the field that could separate you. Looking at this matchup between the Rams and the Saints on Thursday night, we're going to see one team propel themselves a little bit closer to being contenders, and maybe the other propel themselves a little bit closer to being pretenders.
Right.
Looking at both sides, what do you like about both sides that could make them contenders? And what are some things that you have worries about
Well,
that pretenders notion?
okay. I think the Saints defense, if they show up and play some Saints ball, I think they can make this a real good game. Now, what the Saints offense does is the big question, in my opinion, because I don't think it's known. If we can get a running game going, I think it puts a lot of pressure on the Rams because they'll have to, they'll have to put 7 or 8 in the box. If not, and they can just rush Donald and just have 4 coming all the time, that puts a lot of pressure on Carr as far as what he's doing. But I think the key thing is, and I'll say it like we talked about earlier, is that I think that's if the Saints defense shows up, you can put pressure on the Rams and maybe get turnovers and make this game crazy. But I think they really have to run the ball to be successful, and that's what I anticipate on Thursday. And probably in a position of who wants it more, meaning physically, and they're both on a short week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be, we haven't really talked about that. 4 days rest, you're coming in, you're limping coming in the game. Who's gonna put on their big boy pants and show up and want it more? And that team will take it.
Jim, we could talk to you all night, and this has been so much fun. But before we let you go, do you have a prediction for the game? And I think, I think anytime an East Coast Central time zone team comes out to the West Coast, it's tough enough. But now you're talking about, as you pointed out, on 4 days rest, and Saints are coming in banged up anyway. A big character test for both teams because there's so much on the line. What kind of prediction you got for us?
Well, I do see, being it's a home game for the Rams, I see that being a big advantage. Both teams are banged up. So, I mean, I don't, like I said, no Boom's probably not playing. There's another defensive back that's not playing for the Rams. So, I mean, it's going to be who can survive this thing and who can be the most physical. But I have probably the Rams by 3 points. I don't know. I have no idea what the spread is or anything like that, but maybe a 24-21 type game. But if the Saints defense can show up and keep Stafford from whistling in the end zone, then maybe they can flip the script. I haven't read the script though. I haven't read it yet, but that's what I'm thinking.
You gonna come and send it to your house?
No, I didn't get an email this week. Gosh, dang it.
We got to get you back in Goodell's good graces so you can fill us in on this script. That way we won't look like such fools when we make our Saints predictions weekly and during the season.
Well, guys, thank you. I appreciate it. And always rooting for the Saints when we see them. And now the Rams are going. It should be one heck of a game. I mean, we saw last year on Thursday night games, they were kind of horrible. I don't think we're going to see a horrible game. I really don't. I think that both these teams are going to be motivated to play some good ball.
Yeah, and I mean, we joked about a Back to the Future, kind of feel. Saints and Rams have played a lot of big games over the years, especially through the 80s and 90s. This has that kind of feel to it, and I think you're right. I think we're going to see a great game from them. But nothing is as great as you coming on, my friend. Thank you so much. And hey, Merry Christmas to you and your wonderful family. Thank you for everything that you have done for sports in general, but us as friends and the New Orleans Saints organization and for all of Who Dat Nation.
Hey, that's Bob, Brandon. Who Dat?
Who Dat?
Join it. Be good.
Be well.
All right.
Thanks, Jim. Our friend Jim Everett, always great to pick his brain. Right? He's such a great football mind, and I'm glad he went into detail about a couple things. In particular, and I've heard it put this way, but he put it so elegantly and said it again, is that franchises in any sport are built on four cornerstones, right? Almost like four pillars, and that's good staff into the players, how important that is for an organization, and also speaking to us about what makes a good head coach. Because, like I mentioned, there's a lot of you guys out there that say, does coaching really matter? And Jim tells you exactly what he was looking for
Mhm.
in a head coach during his playing career and what he'd be looking for now as a player. So definitely appreciate his insight on that, Bob. What were some of your takeaways from the conversation?
To expound on that, first and foremost, I also love and you know me. I truly believe coaching does matter, but I'm also the very first in line to say the players have to do have to do their job, execute on the field. They need to play well, and it's their responsibility to do so. And there needs to be accountability taken when they don't. But what stood out to me was, like Jim said, and you and I both know this, for a fact. Also, Brendan, is that say hypothetically the Saints do make a move at head coach, and I think that script, for lack of for no pun intended, that script has yet to be finished. That chapter has yet to be finished. A lot will depend on these final 3 games on whether Dennis Allen is back with the Saints or not. But having said that, let's say hypothetically the Saints do make a move at head coach. I think ownership, in fact, I know ownership and general manager Mickey Loomis, who folks isn't going anywhere until he wants to. But ownership and Mickey Loomis really has to have a pulse on the type of players that this franchise has. Your building blocks, your core players. What kind of coach does your Alvin Kamara, your Chris Olave, your Paulson Adibos, Brian Bressees, the young core of this team? What kind of coach are they going to respond to? What made them not respond to Dennis Allen? What made Dennis Allen fail? Those are the questions that have to be answered before you go, before you zero in on your coaching hunt. I mean, it's easy for all of us to sit here in the media and say, oh, the Saints should pursue Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for Detroit, Eric Bieniemy, who has a long and successful resume. Okay, I mean, we know that those guys have been successful in their profession, and I'm sure that they're going to make very good coaches at their next stops. But are those the kind of personalities? Are those the kind of scheme builders and team builders that your best players are going to respond to? And I think Jim hitting that point is something that gets lost on a lot of the fan base and those in the media as well. Basically, anyone who's not in that locker room.
Yeah, and on paper, got it in. On paper in Madden, like, you can do those things. You can hire whatever head coach and say, oh, this scheme's going to work fine in a video game or on paper. Yeah, it sounds great. But like you said, one of the things, and hearing it from a guy who was as successful in his NFL career as Jim was, and the longevity of his career as well, to sit there and say, well, no. And I like what he said. He said it's like a chemistry set.
Yeah.
And a mad scientist trying to put this chemistry set together and make this element work with this element and this personality mesh with this personality. People forget, you include the practice squad nowadays, Bob, and you're looking at 65 plus people playing on one team. And there are some teams where week to week that practice squad looks completely different. And you're sprinkling in a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that and trying to make this recipe work. People forget that ultimately football or any professional sport is a people business more than anything. And you're right, because people in the media and people or whatever we're calling it now, say this as well is, well, they'll get upset when a player has a lot of input on the next head coach, or vice versa, get upset when a player doesn't have enough input on a head coach. Because on one hand, they'll be like, well, why should one player have all the, all the power in their hands to say, well, this is who I want? And then they get mad occasionally because they're like, well, why doesn't this player who's so good on this team have enough input to say, well, this is who I want? And there is a weird bridging middle in that, is, okay, where's the balance here? But in a way, I think it is extremely important, in particular, like the quarterback position, to have input on who they want to be the head coach and what they're looking for. And that's why I asked that question to Jim was, well, what were you looking for in a head coach? What
Because I'll
did
tell you, he's played for 4 Hall of Fame caliber coaches, and just in his pro career. John Robinson with the Rams, and then Chuck Knox. Obviously, Jim Mora for the bulk of his time with the Saints. But Mike Ditka came in on with that final year. 2 of those coaches are in the Hall of Fame, and the other 2 should be. So, yeah, he's played with some spectacular head coaches, man.
And some really different personalities in that as well. Very, across the board, very different people. But it's how you connect with people. It's, like Jim said, it's, I can say it this way to this person, but I got to come across a different way here and there. And we've talked a lot about Dennis Allen and the problems that have been had. And one thing that I always thought was interesting was like, well, he's been on the defensive side. Obviously, the defensive players have received him pretty well, or well enough to where they've been successful. So, like, where's the Oh, we're back. I don't know if you lost me, but I definitely lost you.
You froze for a minute, yeah.
I just ultimately I thought it was a really interesting point that that was made about this about just coaching in general, right? Because at the end of the day, we see it from one perspective. It's completely different being in those locker rooms and being around those guys and getting their perspective on what's important, and what the difference makers truly are. Those are the things I take away from conversations with Jim or really anybody that's been in those NFL locker rooms.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And hey, listen, we got, as to be expected, we not only got such terrific analysis, from Jim Everett through both the Rams and the Saints. Always great to look back, take a trip through through history with him as well. Folks, there's no sense in Brendan and I giving you our analysis tonight. A, it won't be nearly as good as Jim's, and B, you're going to see us in about 21 hours, if my math is correct. So,
yeah, there's no need for much more. I will say this, and Bob, I know you'll be able to attest to this much better and further than I can because of just the age difference. But Jim is one of those guys with the Saints that, I talked about Matthew Stafford getting his flowers. A little bit different. Stafford won a Super Bowl and brought that to a city that really wanted it, and was craving that for a long time, having lost the team and the team coming back. But man, I'm still waiting for Jim to get his flowers in the black and gold. I don't think he's fully received them. You kind of get stuck in between. He's awkwardly thrown in the middle, right? Like Drew was just a little bit after him. It might be a stretch to say he was a little after Archie. He was quite a ways after Archie. But being stuck between 2 of the greatest quarterbacks in franchise history, And the fact that those teams' records were not stellar by any means, particularly the last year, the beginning of the Ditka era, as you like to call it.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's ever truly got his flowers. I mean, you go back and look at his numbers, not just, I mean, in New Orleans alone for that time period, really good. And then you go back, and I'm not just talking about flowers for his time in New Orleans. I mean, in general, his career. You look back at his numbers during the career, and you look at the other quarterbacks that were in the NFL at that time. I mean, he's right up there. He led the league in touchdowns twice. He was a one-time bowler. I mean, he was a stud at quarterback, playing against some of the best defenses of all time. We talked about the Dome Patrol. I'm glad he brought up those really physical 49er defenses he had to face as well in the same division as that dynasty in San Francisco. I mean, I'm still waiting for Jim Everett to get his flowers, Bob. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and don't forget about the defenses in Chicago, the historically good defenses in Chicago, Lawrence Taylor, Carl Banks, and for the New York Giants. And just like the 49ers, very, very physical and underrated defenses for the Washington Redskins as well. That was just in his own conference, just to get out of the NFC. Jim Everett was consistently year in and year out near the top of the league in passing yardage, passing touchdowns. Those LA Rams teams he played on in the late 80s were very, very good. A lot of people my age or older talk about if the 49ers weren't in the NFC, the New Orleans Saints likely would have had at least a couple Super Bowl runs. And I agree with that. But I also submit that the Los Angeles Rams probably would have had a Super Bowl run or two in them as well. And Jim was not only highly productive for the Rams, he still has the top two, the top two most productive seasons from passing yardage wise, in Saints history by a guy not named Breeze. So that's pretty significant. And I mean, you're talking about a quarterback era where, I mean, as I said, he was statistically as good as anybody. And that was an era with Dan Marino, John Elway, Warren Moon, Boomer Esiason. People forget how good Boomer was. The end of Dan Fouts, Joe Montana, beginning of Troy Aikman, Brett Favre, Steve Young. Again, if you don't have to be a deep diving historian to know where those names stand in NFL history, and Jim was as productive as all of them. I feel bad because he didn't have much of a running game in Los Angeles. The Rams traded Eric Dickerson 2 years after he got there, and then traded Jim a year after they got Jerome Bettis. Then Jim gets to New Orleans. Historically great defense in the Dome Patrol and that defensive front, through the late 80s and early 90s. They're starting to age. They're starting to decline. So they needed to rely more on passing the football and offensive production. And they did well, but they lost a lot of close games. They lost a lot of shootouts. If Jim would have had a little bit more playoff success, maybe 3-4 trips to the NFC Championship game instead of one. If he even would have slipped and taken one team to the Super Bowl, be it New Orleans or Los Angeles, I think we're talking about him the same way we're talking about a guy like Matthew Stafford today.
I agree. And the one thing that I've always thought about Jim Everett's career is, the historians might sit there and knock him and say, "Oh, he only went to one Pro Bowl." But again, you just mentioned the guys that he was in the same conference as, and there's only so many guys that go to the Pro Bowl per position. And when you're stuck playing in the same eras as the Montanas of the world, the Elway, not the same conference, but the Elways of the world. I mean, the Marinos of the world. And you continue to go down that list, the Steve Youngs of the world. It's going to be hard for you even as a top 10 quarterback in the league, maybe even a top 5 quarterback in the league. It's tough to make the Pro Bowl year in and year out when you are playing in the same era as the greatest. I mean, you can make the argument now that maybe now is the greatest, or this Breeze, Brady, Manning era could be the greatest quarterback era of all time.
No, I'll die on the hill saying the
You'll die-
80s and 90s quarter. I will die
Exactly.
on that hill.
There's going to be people that have that argument either way, but it is one of the two best quarterback eras of all time, depending on who you ask. I think we can easily say that.
Yeah.
It's tough to make the Pro Bowl year in and year out. And like I said, the dude led the league in passing touchdowns twice. Again, in the same era as some of those greats. So I'm really looking forward to the day. We obviously have given him his flowers. I'm really hopeful and waiting for the day where nationally Jim gets the flowers he deserves for his NFL career. And hopefully you guys enjoyed just being able to see the football intelligence and IQ that Jim Everett has to this day. So, Bob, thank you for reaching out to an old friend and making that happen. I know I enjoyed it. Hopefully the viewers enjoyed it. As Bob said, you guys will see us again in like 21 hours. So, Merry early Christmas, I guess. You know, if you want to see our face a little bit more than you're used to in the course of a week, you don't get like the Sunday, the midweek, and the Sunday. You get the Sunday, the midweek, and then the Thursday. So we are excited.
That's some Bayou Blitz badgering right there.
That was 3 Bs right there. How many of those can we come up with?
Bob, Brendan, and Bayou Blitz badgering. That's what you guys got for Christmas. Yeah, that's what you guys got for Christmas from us and Jim Everett. The only non-B that we're going to give you for Christmas.
Well, there you go. There you go. Oh man, well, we're really excited to continue to break down the Rams and the Saints and what's a crucial game for both franchises this season. Both teams playing decent football, winning some football games to see if they can continue and bring that into tomorrow night in Los Angeles. Bob, I'll let you say real quick where people can follow you and your work as they might have some free time at work tomorrow. I know I am. In the office at that time of year where things are starting to die down, people are going to want to take those extended lunch breaks and read up some Bob Rose articles. Where can they do that?
Well, I hope you do, folks, because I put out a defensive preview, Saints defense versus the Rams offense today. Tomorrow I'm got a sick kid that I'm dealing with tonight, so a little bit behind the 8 ball. It might not be until later morning, lunchtime-ish, but I'll have the Saints offense and how they match up against the Los Angeles Rams defense tomorrow. So check that out, as well as the other articles from John Hendricks, Ross Jackson, and Kyle Mosley through the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, or the SI.com team page. I also post all of my articles on my personal social media, which is Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R2613 on Twitter, and obviously, folks, through our Bayou Blitz Facebook group and Bayou Blitz Twitter page at Bayou Blitz at Bayou Blitz Pod. Make sure you keep bringing Saints fans over that direction. Keep increasing the member size of both groups. Y'all have done such a spectacular job. That's your Christmas gift to us, as well as you're supporting us. We truly love you for it. Again, I know we're going to see you, most of you, tomorrow, but if we don't, I hope you and your families have a very, very Merry Christmas.
Absolutely. I'm still waiting for our Christmas gift, maybe New Year's gift. Is that a thing? Of 2,000 people in the Bayou Blitz Facebook group. We're getting awfully close, so still checking that ticker every day. See how much closer we can get. For myself, you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. You can see my beautiful face and Bob's beautiful face back here tomorrow around 7:30.
One of the two for sure, yeah.
Yeah, one of the two. We'll figure it out. We'll work around people's schedule, and we'll make sure Will's healthy and well, or at least healthy. I don't know about well, but we'll see.
He's a Rose, so the genetics automatically means he'll never be 100% well, but healthy. I'll take healthy.
You really threw yourself under the bus there, didn't you? I was gonna just say coin flip, which one, but Bob took it to another level. Naturally, it's a Rose that took it to another level, right?
Always will. I drive this Bayou Blitz bus straight to hell.
Okay, well there you have it. That deserves a t-shirt as well. Guys, we will see you back here tomorrow night between 7 and 7:30 Eastern time as we preview the Rams and Saints. Thanks so much for tuning in. As Bob said, if we don't see you tomorrow for whatever reason, we hope you guys have a merry Christmas. Until tomorrow, find some peace, spread love, positivity, be well. See you guys tomorrow. Thanks.